I can't believe you'd say something like that to me because I'm black. What were the shocking words said to a pregnant black woman by a Japanese person? Emily, a black female anchor for ABC, one of the major television networks in the States that is watched both domestically and internationally, was extremely nervous when she boarded a crowded train in Tokyo for the first time. Although she had experienced crowded trains many times back home in the States, being black had made such situations unbearable for her on numerous occasions. I'm sure the same thing will happen again. Feeling this way, Emily looked at the many Japanese people on the train, filled with suspicion. However, her worries proved to be unfounded. When the train arrived at her destination, Emily's expression was one of complete relief and happiness. This was because she had been deeply moved by an incident that occurred in the crowded train. What she experienced was something very ordinary and commonplace for Japanese. However, for Emily, who had come from the States, it was an extremely shocking event that even changed her perspective. Did she witness something surprising on the train? Or did something special happen on the train? Emily, who has traveled the world for ABC, experienced something for the first time in Japan. Let's take a look at the Japanese behavior that astonished Emily, a Black American anchor, and the various overseas reactions to it. Emily studied journalism at a prestigious university in New York and, after graduation, joined ABC, a globally famous TV network. She quickly rose as a promising new anchor, steadily building her career. However, before visiting Japan, Emily had been quite depressed due to the deep-seated racism against black people in her home country, the U.S. Despite being a country where people from diverse cultural backgrounds coexist, the U.S. was not a place where different ethnic groups lived peacefully together. Racism, especially by whites against blacks, has been a persistent social issue. Emily had been subjected to discrimination since birth in her homeland. This didn't change even though Emily's profession was a respectable ABC anchor. And even when she became pregnant. In cafes, she wasn't given a menu, and in elevators, no one else would ride with her. These were everyday occurrences. Moreover, various tragedies, such as violence, unjust arrests, and abuse of power by white police officers against blacks, repeatedly occurred in the States. Emily continued to cover such painful news stories, fulfilling her duties as an anchor. Despite taking pride in her work and pushing through the pain, Emily discovered she was pregnant with her husband's child. Even during pregnancy, Emily aimed to work as usual until her maternity leave. However, as a young and relatively inexperienced anchor, covering many distressing events made her feel downhearted. Her husband, Tom, was a good confidant for Emily. She managed to maintain her mental health by venting her work frustrations to him. But recently, this had become increasingly difficult. Without realizing it, the stress from work had started affecting her health. Worried about Emily, Tom suggested taking early maternity leave and going on a trip to refresh herself. He chose Japan as the destination. Despite usually loving travel, Emily's face did not brighten upon hearing Tom's suggestion. Japan is an island nation, and there are probably many exclusive people. It's a country with mostly Japanese people. So I'm worried I'll face even more discrimination than in the States. Because they aren't used to black people, to say nothing of whites. Having a poor impression of Japan to begin with, Emily suggested changing the destination. But Tom said, smiling, "There's no need for that. The things you're worried about won't happen, so you can relax." Tom, who was also black, was confident and reassuring, convincing Emily to trust his words. Believing that she could enjoy herself since her black husband said it would be fine. The couple decided to spend their vacation in Japan. Upon arriving in Japan, Emily was first struck by the cleanliness of the city. Despite being a metropolis, there wasn't a speck of litter, and everything was orderly. She also noticed people forming neat lines without being directed by anyone. "I can't believe everyone is forming such a beautiful line without a single complaint." Emily had heard about the serious nature of Japanese people, but seeing it firsthand moved her deeply. Watching the orderly line, the two headed to a historic, prestigious Japanese restaurant where they had reserved lunch. Emily had an uneasy expression in front of the high-end restaurant. In the States, when Black people enter upscale establishments, they are often stared at, treated coldly by staff, or in the worst cases, denied entry despite having a reservation. What if they kick us out again? With this in mind, Emily nervously followed Tom into the restaurant. However, none of her worries came true. Staff in beautiful kimonos, which are traditional Japanese dresses, greeted them with smiles. "Hello. We've been expecting you." The staff remained kind and courteous throughout, without changing their attitude towards Emily and Tom, even though they were Black. This is the first time something like this has happened. In Japan, it's unthinkable for the staff to change their attitude based on the customer. But for Emily, it was a refreshing and delightful experience. While being guided to their seats, they passed other Japanese customers. But no one looked at Emily with disdain. On the contrary, when their eyes met, they politely bowed their heads in the Japanese manner. The servers who brought their food were also very polite, treating Emily no differently because she was Black. The service was so pleasant that Emily, used to American customs, tried to give them a tip. But they refused to accept it. In the States, the staff improve their service attitude and act kindly for tips. But that's only for money, not out of genuine dedication. Emily was amazed by the Japanese, who provided such high-quality service without accepting tips. After enjoying delicious and beautifully presented Japanese cuisine, Emily and Tom left the restaurant completely satisfied. They then decided to take a train to their next destination, Tokyo Skytree. Since it was a holiday, the station was very crowded. Despite the congestion, the Japanese moved smoothly without bumping into each other, surprising Emily once again. It feels like everyone is considering others when deciding their actions. The train to their destination arrived at the platform, and they boarded. Every car was crowded, and though they managed to get on, there was barely enough space for Emily and Tom to stand. More and more Japanese people continued to board, packing the train to the brim. Tom was swept away by the crowd, leaving some distance between Emily and him. Feeling isolated among the Japanese, a sense of foreboding and anxiety began to creep over Emily. So many people boarded that the doors couldn't close, and the train couldn't depart. Although Emily didn't understand Japanese, she could sense that the station attendant was shouting for someone to get off. "I'm sure the Japanese people will kick me out." Emily muttered this in her heart. It was no wonder she thought this way. In the States, in such situations, white people silently pressure Black people to leave. Even if it's a pregnant woman, such overbearing attitudes from white people are common in the States. Emily had faced many sad experiences like this. However, Emily's worries were unfounded. A few Japanese people standing near the door said, "It didn't work. Let's take the next train," and got off as if it was the natural thing to do. Some even bowed and said, "Sorry." The Japanese inside the train, of course, noticed Emily, who was Black. Still, no one stared or looked at her intimidatingly. In Japan, it's normal for the last ones to board to get off when the train is full. But for Emily, who lived in the States, it was a surprising sight. The door finally closed, and the train started moving. Holding her large belly, Emily tried desperately to grab a hand strap in the shaking train. At that moment, a Japanese woman spoke to Emily. "She's going to tell me not to touch the strap." Thinking this, Emily quickly withdrew her hand with a frightened expression. However, the Japanese woman smiled warmly at Emily and said, "You're pregnant, right? Please, take my seat." The woman, who was sitting right in front of Emily, stood up and gently guided the confused Emily to her seat. Emily was very agitated, not understanding what had just happened. In the States, even after her belly became noticeable, she was rarely offered a seat or given priority. Seeing Emily's confusion, the Japanese woman spoke in fluent English. "It must be hard to stand with such a big belly. The train shakes a lot, so it's dangerous. Please, don't hesitate to sit down." Emily felt tears welling up. "I can't believe a stranger, especially a black foreigner like me, is being cared for. What a kind woman." Looking around, she saw other Japanese people who had witnessed the interaction smiling at her. They seemed pleased that the pregnant Emily had secured a seat. "It's not just this woman who is kind." Astonished, Emily was speechless for a while but finally calmed down and said, "Thank you very much," in broken Japanese. The woman smiled happily, nodded, and got off at the next station. When they arrived safely at their destination, Emily reunited with Tom and excitedly told him about her amazing experience. Emily began to feel a certainty growing within her. "Maybe in Japan, I won't be discriminated against just because I'm black." Emily recalled the train incident, the line she saw that morning, and the experience at the lunch restaurant. The Japanese people who followed rules, were polite, and kind to others seemed unbelievable to Emily. Another event then happened that changed Emily's awareness even further. She noticed some young, flashy Japanese people from the same train car whispering to each other while looking at Emily and Tom. The woman kindly gave up her seat, but maybe black people still stand out too much. "I'm sure they're saying something bad about us." Feeling sad, Emily thought this way, but Tom, who had visited Japan several times for work and could understand casual Japanese conversation, quietly told her, "They're saying your fashion is cool and sexy. They admire your eyes and think they're beautiful." Hearing this, Emily turned around in surprise. "I heard that many Japanese people are shy and introverted, and it seems true." When our eyes met, they looked embarrassed but smiled at me. It made me happy. Since arriving in Japan, Emily had felt the gaze of Japanese people many times. But looking back, she realized it was never a disdainful look. Arriving at the Skytree, Emily gazed in awe at the beautiful view from the top floor. Having experienced Japanese hospitality, regardless of race or skin color, Emily had a very pleasant day. Emily was genuinely happy to have come to Japan. "Tom, I'm really grateful that you brought me to Japan." Having visited Japan many times for work, Tom knew that Japanese people would not discriminate against black people. There are fewer foreigners in Japan, so they might not specifically discriminate against black people. Moreover, they are kind-hearted people who try to understand the feelings of minorities. I've also found new things to admire about them during this trip. Emily was losing confidence, thinking she was of no value and deserved discrimination. However, after interacting with Japanese people, she regained her self-esteem and felt more proud of being black. Emily liked Japan so much that she didn't want to return to the States. But she decided to go back to her country with the motivation and passion she regained in Japan. And after giving birth, she planned to work even more diligently.